Good morning and welcome to Shattering Myths. I am Yahowah. Each weekday here on GCN, we strive to expose the destructive myths which are associated with religion and politics, with patriotism and the media, and with military and economic schemes. Instead of merely presenting the news, our mission on this program is to understand what is happening behind the headlines, while taking a moment to predict how these events will shape our world over the next decade or so. Then during our second hour, we're going to engage God on His terms, using His words, through evidence and reason, since His is the lone reliable voice in an exceedingly disingenuous and lost world. Our phone number, if you'd like to participate in this discussion at any time over the next 2 hours, toll-free, we would encourage you to call 877-300-7645. There were a number of just snippets in the news that I thought we'd begin with. The first of those is that the United States State Department issued a declaration yesterday admonishing Vietnam. They said that Vietnam's recent move to curb Internet usage and to discourage the Vietnamese from having free access to the Internet must be resolved. That we are wholly opposed to using the Internet for political purposes. Of course, that's hypocritical, rather interesting from a nation that has been exposed as one that tracks indiscriminately most everyone's use of the Internet. So the United States doesn't want the Vietnamese to be precluded from using the Internet because that's the way we spy on them. It is truly amazing that we think that we hold the high moral ground, that America can speak with a moral voice. You know, when it became clear that America had stooped to the lowest level of decadence, of not trusting its own people, of negating their oaths to the Constitution of the country, its very foundational document, and it was spying on everyone because it didn't trust anyone, including its own citizens. We abandoned the high moral ground. At that point, we have no right whatsoever to make dictates like this to anyone. We come across as arrogant, as presumptuous, as complete and utter hypocrites, which no one can respect when we do so. Speaking of having no respect, speaking of being bodacious and presumptuous, arrogant, the President of the United States had his administration announce yesterday that the meetings between the U.S., Obama, and the Russia, Putin, were back on. That we had threatened that we would cancel them because we were so upset that Russia was willing to provide a safe harbor for one of the most courageous and noble men in the world today, Edward Snowden. And then today, after we have done a 180, where we've gone from saying, well, boy, if they're going to do that, then we're going to impose economic sanctions, we're going to forego meetings with them, that Russia, by granting Snowden asylum, is a country that we want to punish. We want retribution for this great crime they have done against us. Well, we announced yesterday through official channels, through the U.S. administration, publicly, printed in newspapers around the world, that those meetings were back on. That Mr. Obama would, in fact, meet with Mr. Putin. Well, that was just a staged game, a game of positioning, so that today Obama could look like he was in control and cancel the meeting. I mean, what kind of impression do you think the United States makes on world leaders when, A, it threatens them, then it says, okay, we'll reconcile, let's meet, and then the following day has its president say, no, we're going to cancel the meeting? Don't you think we come across as moronic, as a nation that would be the last on earth that you'd want to trust? Well, that's exactly what happened with Obama's little game today. Speaking of being a lost country, a country that has completely lost its way, it's a country where the vast preponderance of the citizens have gone into the world of ignorance and irrationality, led there by repulsive national leaders who are undermining the very fabric that the country was originally established upon. We were played by fools, or we were played as fools by fools in Yemen. We wanted to make it sound like, oh boy, there's a really purpose for PRISM, which is the National NSA broad net that doesn't target, that indiscriminately spies on everyone's keystrokes of the internet. And we wanted to justify, our politicians wanted to justify this unreasonable use of search and seizure. And we wanted to make America say, you know, you're getting a great value for the hundreds of billions of dollars that we have squandered to spy on you. And so we said, oh boy, we have used this system to detect a communication at the highest level of al-Qaeda, and therefore we have shut down our embassies because there's an impending plot. We're not going to tell you what the plot is, but you can trust us, it's there, and we found it because of our great surveillance and scrutiny of these communications between al-Qaeda leaders. Yeah, they said boo. And we cowered. They're sitting there laughing at us. So now that the gig's out, now that it is obvious that we cowered because al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula is little more than a website. The estimates that have been done on how many members there are of al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula is in the 100 to 200 range. And we have bombed with our drones Yemeni Muslim fundamentalists in association with what is really little more than a website, relentlessly. We've killed more al-Qaeda members in Yemen than there are or ever were al-Qaeda members in Yemen. So today, to keep from looking like the Chicken Little character who is running around saying the sky is falling, oh boy, we're out of abundance of caution, we're bringing our representatives out of Yemen, we're closing our embassies throughout the Islamic world, and we're telling Americans you ought not travel because it's really scary out there. Well, we say that Yemen foiled an al-Qaeda plot to blow up pipelines and to seize some of the country's main ports. All righty. Let's say it's true, and it's not, but let's say it's true. Why would that cause America to cower and shut down its embassies and cower inside of them, trembling in fear throughout the Islamic world? Why not just deal with removing American personnel from working on oil pipelines and the two cities that were allegedly targeted? If we're so smart, if we have all this information, why didn't we just do that? Well, here's the story. It is completely manufactured. It's a case of we created the fear, and then we came up with the explanation, and it all ties together so nicely in the end. The headline is, Yemen says it foiled an al-Qaeda plot. Now, as I said, al-Qaeda in Yemen is little more than a website, to blow up pipelines and to seize the country's main ports. Security remains tight, and hundreds of armored vehicles, most supplied, by the way, by the United States, have been deployed to protect key cities. But the U.S., people just scrambling. I mean, absolutely in fear. Terrorism causes people to respond this way. Both the U.S. and U.K. have withdrawn their diplomatic staff from Yemen, prompted by intelligence reports of renewed terrorist activity. Yeah, there were press releases. The U.S. is reported to be preparing special operations forces for possible strikes against al-Qaeda in Yemen. Yeah, that would be great. We squandered $6 trillion. We created conditions that led to the deaths of 1 million people, making bad situations infinitely worse by our special forces activities in Iraq and Afghanistan, and by our militant support for Syria and Libya. And so what is the solution to that? That we have just made a complete mess of every country that we have invaded and aided in this regard in the Islamic world. Oh, the U.S. is preparing special operations forces. Are we now looking for a new set of lies to invade another country? Is shutting down the internet site of AQ, AP, so important that we're going to deploy troops in Yemen? Suspect U.S. drone strikes killed 7 alleged al-Qaeda militants in Yemen on Wednesday, the 5th such strike in less than 2 weeks. You know, when you murder people in the way that we do, without due process, completely beyond the scope of international law, when your president acts as if he is God and has the right over life and death, when he says he can determine who it's appropriate for us to murder, but when they strike back, they're terrorists. When we hit them, we're moral and doing justice in the world. When you reach that point, when you are that upside down in your thinking, when you're that corrupt as it relates to your morality, the whole world begins to close in on you, and there's nothing left but fear and paranoia. And that's where America finds itself this day. Welcome back to Shattering Myths, in a story that is stranger than any novel that has ever been published. The BBC's correspondent in Washington, not in Yemen, David Wells, so he's getting this information, of course, from the administration of Barack Hussein Obama, says it appears that Yemen was in the center of a complex and audacious plot. Had it succeeded, would have given al-Qaeda control over a crucial aspect of the country's infrastructure. Ooh. Yemeni government spokesman Raja Bhatti played along, and he said the plot involved blowing up oil pipelines. By the way, that's something that Muslims do on a daily basis. And taking control of certain cities, including 2 ports in the south, one of which accounts for the bulk of Yemen's oil exports, and where a number of foreign workers are employed. Boy, isn't that exciting. Can you imagine fundamentalist Muslims wanting to blow things up? Fundamentalist Muslims wanting to take control. Yes, this is news, an audacious plot. But we have tumbled to the point where so many people have ingested the Kool-Aid, laced with the poison of deception, that They go on with the story. Here is the news media, the BBC, acting as co-conspirators in the plot. This would be coordinated with attacks by al-Qaeda members on the gas facilities, blowing up gas pipelines, Mr. Body said. Good grief. And so now you're going to claim, in addition to the fact that you used PRISM, which, by the way, wasn't used, that's a domestic spying apparatus, to find this chatter online, which had no specificity whatsoever. It was a press release by Zawahiri. And it, of course, was posted on the internet site of AQAP. And for that, we made this mountain of terror and fear that was about to be unleashed against America. Chatter that rivaled the chatter not seen before the events of 9/11. But we saved the day because in cooperation with our allies like Yemen, we foiled the plot. Oh, America, you can rest peacefully tonight because your government is on the job. And the media is at watch. Oh, we are so utterly pathetic. Oh, Yemeni officials quoted by AP. Now, I wonder if that's the AQAP or the APAP as an Associated Press, or is that the al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula that time had between 175 and 200 members? Yes, those are really super jihadists. Boy, you can't compare the AQAP jihadist with your ordinary, average, run-of-the-mill jihadist, because those 100 guys were capable of blowing up pipelines around the world, maybe, not just in Yemen, taking down entire cities, rendering ports destroyed. The super jihadist of AQAP. Well, a Yemeni official was quoted by the AP news agency and said that they believed that the motive for the planned attacks, oh, catch this, they believed that the motive, now what do you think the motive will be? What was the motive of Sharnarev brothers as they attacked Boston runners and spectators? That America is killing Muslims. Do you think that might be their motive? Yes, indeed. Yes, the motivation was retaliation for the killing of a senior cleric, Saeed al-Shiri, who was critically wounded in a November drone strike and later died of his injury. When a Muslim fundamentalist is killed by an American, all of the Muslim fundamentalists around them vow revenge, and by killing them, we end up with them killing us. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. One last statement from the great plot of 2013 and the internet chatter that was ultimately foiled by our allies in Yemen, bringing the plotters down. A human rights advocate in Shanna, Shamia Haddad, told the BBC's World Update program that the atmosphere in the city was tense. Quote, everyone is feeling that there is something going on, but nobody knows what is going on, she said. You know, I don't think that Barack Hussein Obama is a stupid man. Evil, immoral, lacking of understanding, lacking of any redeeming qualities. Yeah. Stupid? Probably not. So there is no chance whatsoever that this is all by accident. This man literally conceived this story and then sought to perpetrate it on the American people to justify his breach of his fiduciary duty and the Fourth Amendment, to justify spying on Americans and saying, boy, you can trust our government because we rooted out the plot and then we foiled it.
I think the only place that stupid really applies to all these stories is towards the American, your general public. Just look at the case of Nixon.
Yes.
He bugged the hotel room, and people immediately, they went into an uproar and they started the impeachment process, and he had to resign his position. This man is bugging every person in the world. Every person in the world.
Yeah, there's two.
American people.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Scott. And there's two tie-ins here. One tie-in, which is absolutely brilliant, which is that Richard Nixon bugged a hotel room, and Barack Hussein Obama is bugging the entire world, including all of his own citizens. And both men yet lied about doing it. Obama deceived the American people. In fact, his administration specifically under oath perjured themselves before Congress regarding this. Richard Nixon allegedly obstructed justice by lying about what he had done. So the difference here is that in the case of Richard Nixon, he bugged one hotel room when Obama's bugging the entire world. And Richard Nixon obstructed justice so that he tried to cover up his malfeasance, his paranoia, and the Obama administration is perjured themselves under oath to the U.S. Congress and to the American people at large. And in one case, we impeached, we forced the man to resign pending impeachment, and now nothing. Nothing.
And it's not like he hasn't. This isn't the only thing that he's been caught lying about. Look at Benghazi. Right. They said it was a video.
Right.
Hillary Clinton,
right.
Obama,
right.
Numerous other people came out and said it was this video that caused this. Now they're
deliberately, knowingly, purposefully lied. Even said, we were reporting the fluid information as it was given to us and simply telling the American people what we knew at the time, when in fact the reports that were coterminous with the attack specified not only that it was an Islamic terrorist organization who was conducting the attack, but named them as Ansar Sharia, the Friends of Sharia Law, told the administration that was the case, and the administration, rather than simply reporting the information that it had been provided by the State Department and the CIA, went through 12 added passes to change the information from what they knew to be true to an outright lie, and now when they are questioned on their malfeasance, they just say, it's a phony scandal. Which is ridiculous. And nobody says anything about it. Everybody just, that is what has to stop. That can't be acceptable. But the reason that it will continue is the vast preponderance of Americans are so dependent on their government. They're so dependent on being bribed for their compliance, just as America is bribing Pakistan to pretend to be our friend, just as it's bribing in Egypt and the military coup leaders and before them the Muslim Brotherhood to pretend to be our friend. The American government is bribing the vast majority, not the vast majority, but certainly the majority of Americans into supporting all of this, to go along with it, to not rock the boat because they're on food stamps and welfare and on the Ponzi scheme of Social Security, and their government is catering to their health care, and there's the propaganda that we're protecting the American people and defending their liberty. All of this.
Or they're worried about losing their press credentials.
Why?
Like that.
So that we can continue to destroy ourselves, that we can continue to deceive ourselves, so that we can continue to be the laughing stock of the world. What has happened to us? It's 40 years ago that America had enough moral fiber to say of a man that was paranoid of his political rival and that acted as if he was above the law and then deceived American people regarding what he had done, that we forced him to resign from office, and now we celebrate this sort of stuff. Now we drink the Kool-Aid as it's being handed out by a charlatan of gargantuan proportions. Boy, we've fallen a long way in 40 years, haven't we? Well, that is where we are. You know, the trial, another story here, the trial of the U.S. Army psychiatrist who, this is Major Hassan, that shot and killed 13 soldiers in Texas at Fort Hood and maimed many more, started yesterday. And the first thing that we learned from this is that the judge over this particular trial, and the jury here is comprised entirely of U.S. military officers, colonels, lieutenant colonels, and the like. And that the judge said that he would not allow this to be a referendum on religion, that Hassan's religious views would not be considered in the court, that he could not speak about his religious views. Well, that's 100% of the reason for the murders. And Hassan has said so in exactly those terms. The second thing he said is that, Hassan claimed that as a Muslim he had to go and perpetrate these killings to save Muslims in Afghanistan. And so the judge has decided that there would be no testimony regarding a referendum on the merits of America's invasion of Afghanistan. So the only two things that really are of interest in this trial, the motivation being the religion of Islam, and the issues relative to what triggered him, which was America's invasion of Afghanistan and the killing of Muslims there, that those two things are off limits. So talk about a bizarre environment, and it's supposed to go on for a month or more. Hassan's opening statement is, he says, I did it. I am a mujahideen in Allah's cause. I did it. It's obvious that I did it. All of the evidence says that I did it, and I'm not denying I did it. I did it. And yet, for a month or more, we're going to go through this charade of a trial. When he is defending himself, and the first thing he says is, I did it, and this is the reason that I did it? Any snippet that you get from this trial is it's as bizarre as the story that we've just shared regarding the foiled internet attack that had everyone playing Chicken Little. Let me read some of these snippets, excerpts from the articles. A former U.S. Army psychiatrist killed 13 soldiers at a base in Texas. It was Fort Hood in 2009. Now imagine, this occurred in 2009. It's 2013. This is a military tribunal which could have taken place a week later. But no, it's been 4 years. Beyond all of that, it's not just 4 years. During this time, the United States has deliberately, purposefully, stupidly, immorally said this was not an act of terrorism. No, this was an act of workplace violence. So one way to say that we have foiled every terrorist attack in America is that every terrorist attack in America you call by a different name. Just play with words.
It's just like unemployment. If you stop
Yeah.
looking for a job, you're not unemployed.
That's right. In fact, it was interesting, this, and I'll get back to Major Hassan here in a moment, is that about a week ago, there was all of these great news reports. The media was just lapping up the administration's story that 180,000 new jobs had been created and that unemployment dropped again. Well, about 3 days later, the news comes out that the number of jobs available to Americans dropped steeply, and that the unemployment rate only went down because fewer people were still looking for jobs. That the difference between what had existed and what now existed was that many of those who had been looking for jobs had just given up. Fun with words. This is the next ongoing statement of this, 2009. Well, Hassan admitted in court that he was the gunman. Now, he apologized for any mistakes in his court-martial hearing. Now, he said this. He said, the evidence, this is his opening statement, the evidence will clearly show that I am the shooter. Now, back in the day, in the judicial system of the United States, if you enter a plea of I'm guilty, I am the shooter, the evidence will show I am guilty, you moved from that statement to sentencing. What is the purpose of trying a man who admits that he's perpetrated the crime? He says the evidence will show I am guilty. He, of course, is acting as his own lawyer, and he told the jury of 13 military officers that I committed the crime. He says, we are imperfect Muslims trying to establish the perfect religion. Imagine being that deceived. And what were the jurors told? To disregard that, because this will not be a referendum on religion. Welcome back to the final segment of the news hour of Shattering Myths. I'm your host, Yahowah. You can participate in this discussion, 877-300-7645. Here's a few more comments from the trial of Major Nadel Hassan, who has admitted that he is the shooter. He said, all of the evidence will point to me. I did it. I am a mujahideen. As a matter of fact, following his opening statement, Major Nadel Hassan specifically referred to himself as a mujahideen, a flawed Muslim that was attempting to establish the perfect religion. He said that the dead bodies will show that war is an ugly thing. He then cross-examined a prosecution witness, including a number of them, including a retired lieutenant colonel. This is Ben Phillips, his former boss. When pressed by the defendant, Phillips acknowledged that his officer evaluation report of Hassan, who was, by the way, going around and telling inmates from post-traumatic stress in the hospitals in the Texas area where he was being paid and has continued to be paid. By the way, he's taken another $300,000 from the U.S. government while he awaits trial. So he's been paid another $300,000 because this was an act of workplace violence, after all, according to the U.S. government. He was telling his patients that they deserve to be suffering because they were Muslim killers. And so the evaluation report that Ben Phillips gave to Major Hassan was outstanding. Lunsford, who was shot 7 times during the incident, described what happened in the day. He said he first saw Hassan sitting in a chair with his arms on his knees and looking at the floor. It was in an Islamic position. You know, you see them cross-legged with their arms on their legs. They sit on the floor that way. Then he jumped up, so he was in prayer at the time to his wannabe god, Allah, and he ordered the one civilian to leave the room before shouting, guess what? Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater. And then he opened fire. Panic, of course, set in among the soldiers. They were being shot at, and so they panicked, and as they crowded towards the door, they jammed the door. Earlier, Hassan cross-examined Pat Sonti, who met Hassan at the Killeen, Texas Islamic Center in Fort Hood in the morning. So there is an Islamic center in Fort Hood. Here, Americans have lives being snuffed out, fighting Muslims, and yet right in the middle of the base that is training Americans to go off and fight and kill Muslims, we have a Islamic training center. It's just perfect. Anyway, he said that Santi said that Hassan took the microphone at the mosque, and he himself called for the Islamic prayer the morning that he killed 13 people. It's not clear, the article says, how the 42-year-old Hassan plans to fashion his stance into a defense. Well, he's not defending himself. He's admitted to the crime. He's proud of what he did. He did so in the name of Allah and Islam. Hassan had wanted to argue that he shot U.S. troops to protect Taliban fighters in Afghanistan, but the judge forbade the American-born Muslim and former Army psychiatrist from using that defense. He wanted to argue that he was a mujahideen acting out his role to perfect the religion of Islam, but the judge said he would not allow that as a defense either. 3 witnesses took the stand after opening arguments, including the manager of the gun store called Guns Galore, where Hassan had purchased his Glock 27 Model 5.7 handgun used in the attack. They even had testimony on the number of bullets and the placement of the spent cartridges around the room. Everything but what mattered. Now, this trial is expected to take weeks, possibly months. Taking the witness stand will be many of the more than 30 people who were wounded, plus dozens of others who were inside the Post-Soldier Readiness Processing Center. Yes, one armed man sitting cross-legged on the floor, shouting Allahu Akbar, was able to kill 13 soldiers and seriously wound 30 more. At a Soldier Readiness Processing Center. Is there something wrong with that equation? Is there something just seriously wrong about a man in a room filled with soldiers who are being readied to go fight in Afghanistan, and one man sitting in the middle of the room can wound 30 and kill 13? Something to think about. We'll return to Shattering Myths in a moment.